Well, you know, I look at the issue of children's rights from my own unique lens. I've lived for over 30 years in an indigenous community in Alaska, and I've been intimately involved in education on a lot of different levels. And I look at the manner in which the indigenous people in this country have been disenfranchised from the education of their young people. And it's happened, and it is still happening. You know, we are mostly aware of the history of the boarding schools here in the lower 48, as we call it. We have that same history in Alaska. The last boarding schools in Alaska closed in the early 70s. And I guess I think a lot about what it means for a people to lose control over the education of their children, and what that means for the children, and the links that within the Native communities in this country were broken by that boarding school process. The book that I just wrote, the one that was named for a National Book Award finalist, dealt with that era in Alaskan history. But the ramifications of that are affecting our children today. And I'm very deeply involved in issues of language and culture. I think a lot of, basically, not to put too blunt a point on it, but I consider it cultural genocide, some of the things that have happened to Native people in this country, especially the languages. There were scores, maybe hundreds of Native languages that have ceased to exist since 1492. Currently there's 200 some that are still in existence. 87% of those are defined as moribund, as is Nubak. It's estimated that the majority of them will be gone by 2050. You know, and a people, especially an indigenous people, their connection to who they are is with the land, and the language is intimately connected to that. In my mind, that's a children's right issue, because it affects them. It's a loss that these young people feel, and it's led to social ills that we're really battling with where we're at.
Wojciech, I'm wondering if your book, The Night Wanderers, is the first book that really deals with children, or whether there were children's rights issues in any of your earlier work.
Yes, this is the first book that in such a great extent focus on the children's rights. But talking about these books and thinking about it, I realized that as a journalist, I was not specializing in topics, in issues, not in the human. I was not writing about human rights or children's rights. I was covering the areas, countries that formed my area of interest and sphere of influence. And mostly I covered war situations in Asia, in Caucasus, in Africa, where during the war the human rights are violated. And I think that I was the witness, sad witness, unfortunate witness, how the children's rights were violated as well. In the beginning, I didn't pay attention on children's rights. When I was meeting soldiers, young one, I didn't think about them, are they children or are they the adult person? Because to be a soldier or a guerrilla, for me, it was an adult role, so I treated them as adults. And in first time that I realized I'm talking to child soldiers was 1996 in Congo, when I met a boy with a machine gun guarding the office of Joseph Kabila, nowadays President of Democratic Republic of Congo. I was waiting for an interview, and we were talking. When I was called to talk with Kabila, this boy asked me to give him some cigarettes. And I asked him, how old are you? And he said, 11. And I realized that my son was 11, and me and my wife, we were worrying if he's big and grown up enough to go to school on his own. So I realized that I'm talking not to a soldier, but also to a boy. And I traveled to Uganda. On the way to Congo, I was passing Uganda, and I knew about Lord Resistance Army and what was going on in Uganda since late 80s. And, but I never had the time to spend more days or weeks on researching this exact problem. And finally, in 2006, when I decided to write about LRA, I spent weeks on 2 research trips. And then I realized what kind of tragedy it is, what is happening with children kidnapped and transformed into soldiers. And it's not only the tragedies, it's not only the deaths, their suffering, but the change, the worst crime committed on them was the crime committed on their mentality, psychology. I've been told in Uganda that Joseph Kony was kidnapping children. I mean, the target was children between 8 and 9, because he found out that they are the best children to transform into soldiers. They were big enough to carry weapons, to understand orders, and to survive in the bush, but they were too young, enough young to transform the mentality, to do this brainwash. Mm-hmm. So this book, Night Wanderers, is more a book about difficulties to understand their situation and their state of mind than about the child soldiers. But yes, it was the first book which deals with the children's rights violation in such a massive children's rights violation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Arn, did you want to offer something about your own experience?
Yeah. I'm very lucky to be among this panel, panelists, distinguished panelists, which I'm now pretty close to Patty about the book called Never Fall Down and the subject of the book. To have my work and my life exposed to the world a little bit for especially the young American to learn about.
Could you speak right in?
Yeah, the young American to learn about my life. I'm pretty emotional about this topic, so my voice is a little shaken. I think how my work related to children's rights. I think it's probably all of my work related to children's rights. Even though myself, I don't really understand the concept or what we call even universal right or the right of the children around the world, that we all leaders have meetings in Geneva, or I don't know much about all those, but all I know that I myself was one of the victims as a child, 9, 10 years old, who carried gun, forced by the Khmer Rouge to carry guns and fight. Saw my little sister, 9-year-old girl, was starved to death by the Khmer Rouge, watching her slowly to death. Many more. But my work, like you mentioned some before, my work like with the Peacemaker that I started in Lowell, Massachusetts, where I was resettled with my adopted family. I work with young people from all over different groups of gang members to get them in a place they can dance and sing about their own lives. And there were a 9-year-old boy who carried guns, who showed me guns in his laundry. He said, you work with us. Do you know anything about guns? I have to start doing some proving to him. So the boy, maybe I call him a little Buddha. He probably, I found out that he was shot was shot dead in Lowell a few years after I came back to do all my work. Children of War, also I co-founded in New York City many years ago. I work with the young people all over from 50 countries, like from different two sides of the conflict, like from Israel, Palestine, African, Northern Ireland kids and Southern Ireland kids, the Catholic, the Protestant. I brought them here to talk about their lives, about why they were fighting each other. I want to learn about other countries, not just my own. So a few times now, and my work now with Cambodian Living Arts in Cambodia that involve getting young girls out of prostitution as young as 9 years old. She doesn't have to carry guns like I was, but I began to understand is their children's right. So this young girl that we are now instead helping out from the street I asked why we deserve this after many years of war and genocide. So we get them play traditional music, dance, and sing, and they're happy now, making some money, and they're very happy to perform for other people. That's an outlet that Cambodian Living Arts is doing, besides saving the masters who were slaughtered by the Khmer Rouge, only about 5% left in my whole country. So I'm just saying that and now the book have a little bit written about me, about my life, not much my work yet, but my life as a child soldier. So I'm really grateful that, so I think my work is related to children's rights, even though I don't know.
Yes, it sounds like children's rights permeate everything you've done. Yeah. I wanted to talk, or have the panelists talk a little bit about the history of the children's rights movement, which I've been reading about a lot this week. And my first question was for Wojciech about Janusz Korczak, who was a Polish pediatrician, author, educator, and children's rights pioneer whose teachings inspired the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is the year of Janusz Korczak, commemorating 70 years since he perished at Treblinka with children from his Warsaw Ghetto orphanage. Wojciech, is there anything you can tell us about him? For example, how he is seen in Poland today, and more generally, about how the Polish people respond to the issue of children's rights today?
Janusz Korczak, he was and he is still a hero in Poland and for Poles. We have many such a tragic situation during the Second World War, but his history, his life, and how he died, how he sacrificed himself for the principle and for the children that he was taking care of was very unique. I remember at school we have a special lessons on Janusz Korczak and his history. There are many books, films. He's one of Poles that we are the most proud of. How we remember Korczak as a hero, as a martyr. But I think that we do not know too much about what he was trying to teach us, how to behave children, how to bring up children, how to educate them, what are the children's rights. I see some contradiction even when I try to remember my history lessons about the same period of time in Poland. On one hand, it was Janusz Korczak and his children who died together in Treblinka. On the other hand, we have a Warsaw uprising. It was which was very cruelly suppressed by Germans in 1994, so 2 years later. And they were children who were taking part in this uprising. In the downtown of Warsaw, we have a monument. It's a little insurgent. And this monument is, how to say, it was built for the boy who was 11 years old, and he was killed during the uprising. He was killed by Germans. But we cannot put all guilt on Germans, because on one hand, if you ask any Pole today, what do we feel about the child soldiers, we would be very against it, this phenomenon. On the other hand, we are very proud of our little insurgents who we considered patriots, and they were scouts. They are small children who voluntarily joined the uprising. So it's not so obvious, I would say. On one hand, children kidnapped, forced to do some roles, to fight. On the other hand, the children who were joining uprising voluntarily. I think that the ideas of Janusz Korczak, they deserve studying, and not only once, not during 1 year. I think that it should be at schools generation after generation, even if we do not agree 100% what he was trying to tell us. Maybe he was too brave, too radical, I would say, in many reasons. For example, what he said about well, he decided not to have the children of himself, his own children, he was calling this private children, in order to take care about all children. So I don't think that it is accepted to every family in Poland or in the United States. But on the other hand, to acknowledge that the children have their own rights, like all other adult person, and that these rights should be respected, even by the parents who are supposed to be the teachers. I think that we should remember, and from time to time, we should think about the ideas that Korczak was trying to tell us, not only about his tragic history.
Yes, yeah. I think too often people are remembered for how and why they died, yes, and not so much for what they did during their lifetime.
Exactly.
I wanted to talk also a little bit about the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This was passed by the United Nations General Assembly in 1989 and ratified by all the participating nations of the UN except the United States and Somalia. It affirms the rights of children for adequate food, clean water, and a safe place to live, for health services and the right to an education, for freedom of thought, association, and privacy, for the right to play and access to information and children's books, for respect for their views and protection from violence and exploitation of all kinds. Do you think it has been a useful document, and how has it affected the struggle for children's rights around the globe?
I'm going to jump in, even though I'm not at all an expert on this issue. I studied up on Article number 14 maybe 2 years ago. Amnesty International did a series, they did a booklet that had short stories where authors were invited to write a short story that explicated any one of those rights. So I chose number 14, which is the right of children to leave. If there's a violent situation in your country, you have the right to leave the situation. To me, that seems as though that's one of the ones that we could enforce, that it's almost impossible to get another country to enforce adequate education or the right to play. But when there is a violent situation, and we know it's coming, that to get the children out of harm's way before the tinderbox goes, seems to me that it would head off so many problems that come along later. Trafficking, kidnapping, lack of nutrition, the trauma, etc. So I guess I was just putting out my 2 cents for focusing on one of the ones that I see is more achievable in discrete situations of war.
Well, of course, the problem with conventions like that is everyone will be happy to sign them, but enforcing it and actually getting countries to carry out what they've signed is another thing entirely. And of course, there are people at the UN who are working on this all the time, but I'd say the history has been checkered at best, despite the convention having been signed. Debbie?
Well, I just wanted to mention this, kind of fits into this. In 2007, the UN passed a Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the right to education, which plays into this. You know, it said basically that Indigenous people have the right to educate their children in their own language, from their own cultural perspective. And it's very ironic that in this country, that has been rendered impossible And there are many, many Native communities, mine included, who are in the process of trying to bring their traditional values and educational beliefs and philosophies back into the school system. And of course, how can they bring a language back in when it's nearly dead? So it's an ironical thing that in our own country, that's where we're at with that particular declaration.
Do they teach Inupiaq in the Barrow schools?
Oh, they do. But you know, we were talking about it back in the wings. I mean, English is prevalent everywhere, all over the world, and our country is. Our educational system, I would characterize it as aggressively monolingual. And it's very difficult. And the thing is that, you know, the history of Native peoples being disconnected from their community. My husband went to boarding school when he was 11 years old. He went home when he was 18. His language, it was inside of him, but it was gone. You know, he said his tongue got twisted. That's how he describes it. So he remembers the first time he ever experienced corporal punishment. It was for speaking his own language. And that's my generation. That's not that long ago. Okay, so there's a lot of parents who experienced severe trauma in their educational system and the way they were educated. So I guess my point is that it's multi-generational. And the young people now, yeah, we're trying to teach the language in the school, but it's not integral to the system. And we're trying to recreate the system and make it, you know, it's like trying to resurrect something. And the kids feel it. And they know it's their birthright to have their language. And they mourn it. And there's the social statistics are not good. You know, our young men have their suicide rate is 10 times the national average. And this is Native America, 3 out of 4 women will be sexually assaulted within their lifetime. You know, these are the social ills, and it's connected. You can trace the connections.
How do you think children's rights can be better protected, especially in war zones and when it comes to preserving and passing on traditional cultures and languages?
Arn can probably speak to this more articulately than I can about the importance of traditional culture and music to protect children and you talked to me before about how the connection is broken when you lose your language and you lose your music, and how hungry those, like the gang kids were for that tradition. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, the Cambodian living art that I started in Cambodia now in 1998. In fact, it begins in Lowell, Massachusetts, where I work with the gang kids who know nothing about art. You know, of course they do whatever is popular, like hip hop, rap, and they rap usually violent rap because that's what their life is, violence. And I don't know. But I tested. I found a master, a Cambodian traditional musician, and to teach them. And it's not a music. I think it's music is a platform for these young kids. In the beginning, they were curious about it, but their relationship built over time, the master and the student. And they began to ask each other about their lives and all that. And they were surprised to also some of the traditional masters who, you know, cited like poem arts in Cambodia that I myself didn't even know of, you know. It's like rap in a way, but in my own language. And it exists 1,000 years ago. And this kid was like blown off the water. So they were curious about what they found out. And someone have to build that platform in order for them to come together and share the story. That's really important. We have to create that stage for them. And I built a studio for them too. I asked for, equipment and stuff like that because I don't have money of my own. I mean, I work on the street. I never had a real job in America. But it's the same way in Cambodia when I found out that these young people are curious about finding out how their parents met, how their parents ate, how the dance step they dance or something. They were curious very much. And so it connects them back to the greatness, to how their parents met, their great-grandparents met. So, and it gives them pride, and then confidence. And then more thing I see, that it's, so they still live in the slum. Only this few years we can measure it. In this few years, this girl who's prostituting themselves start dancing, start sharing her story. And she's not in the slum anymore in her head. We can't, technically or financially, we can't sometimes help those kids out of the slum or the place where they, but we have to be there for them. We have to go there, so we have to meet them.
Yeah,
like
so you're
that.
giving them like a cultural wealth that's connecting them to their past and to their culture and also connecting the generations.
And they want it. Yeah. They want it when they felt it inside their bones. They felt it inside their bone. They will make a better decision in their lives to maybe transform their own lives and their community and maybe the world. What they see best. But some people only want them to sell their body, to sell their products. Willing to put them on music video and cheat them and make a lot of money from them. The girl don't make much money, but the pimp and the soldier and everybody else, some of those people knows about children's rights, but the situation in the street, you have to, the human rights worker has to be there.
Yeah, because there's always people ready to exploit the kids. Yeah.
You have to be willing to die. I mean, with this work, with this kind of work, we're all gonna die anyway.
Wojciech, I wanted to ask you about something you wrote in The Night Wanderers. In a way, the journalist profession has betrayal coded into it. It demands gaining people's trust and extracting confidences from them purely in order to publicize and reveal them, all for a sense of a job well done, for satisfaction, applause, and prizes. And that caught my eye because it reflected to me some ambivalence on your part about your role as a journalist, coming in as an observer, or as someone telling the story, other people's stories in other cultures, and raising the question of, are you exploiting them for their story in some way? Could you comment on that?
I mean, yeah, I feel that I'm exploiting my characters, the people that I met. This is the duty of the journalist. It all depends on what I want from them. If I want only simple quotation, we didn't have to trust each other. It's just a sentence. If it is enough for a story, that's good. But if I want to do some more, to understand more, I have to spend more time with the people that I want to talk. They should trust me. I don't use the big word friend, but somehow they have to trust me to tell me their true stories, what they feel, what they felt. And my job is to tell this story to outside words. So it's just contradiction again. Friendship means that if we talk to each other, if I tell you all my secrets, it's not that you will tell the secrets to anyone else, it's just for you. But as a journalist, my duty is to tell to my readers what I heard. I don't feel very good with this, being frankly, but on the other hand, I'm not trying to, I'm not gossiping, I'm not selling the secrets, I'm just trying to understand the real issue, what really mattered for these people. With adult person, it's not that difficult, but I found the most difficult conversation were with the refugees, with the people who were the victims of war, but they survived, and with the children, of course, because that's why I decided to write the book about my own experience, talking with the children, trying to communicate with them, because it was very difficult and hard to find a common language. It was the problem of the language, of course. English is not perfect, and they hardly speak English, so I have to use translator. But the strangest and the toughest thing for me was to ask them about their experience in the bush, in the guerrilla army. They were killing people. They were the victims, but they were also oppressors in the same time. So how to ask 11-year-old boy how many people he killed? I asked one, and he told me 100. But I didn't know what did 100 meant. It was really 100, or it was just a lot. And a lot means 2, 4, and it doesn't matter. The numbers are not important. How it is to be a 10-year-old kid, to be forced to kill a person. So, if not the ladies who were taking care of these children, if not the doctors, the psychologists who were helping them, I think I will not talk to them at all. I was using their files, what they told the doctors before, so I was reading more than talking to the children. But, well, yes, this is the job of the journalist, to find out secrets and to tell these secrets to everybody else, unfortunately.
Patty and Debbie, maybe you could also comment on how, when you're writing about these difficult and painful subjects, how do you cope with the personal challenges of dealing with, the experiences of the pain of the people you're writing about?
It's a very honest answer that you gave about the experience of being a journalist and interviewing people, because I think there's a part of you that while you're having the conversation and you write something in your notebook, you're thinking, that's great, I know that's going to end up in the book. And then there's a part of you, the human part, that is just dying inside. So you have this feeling like you're a vulture on the one hand, but you're suppressing your true reaction to witnessing someone's pain. When I came home from interviewing the girls in the brothels and the mothers who had sent their children away to jobs that never materialized, I was very depressed. I'd kept all my feelings to myself during the interviews. I came home and I just felt scummy, and I felt daunted, like the world is really a terrible place and I can't do justice to these stories, and my little book isn't going to make a difference. And then you kind of, give yourself a slap in the face and say, that's why I went on the trip. That's why they trusted me with their stories. And it's a privilege to interview somebody, and someone like Arn, who is so honest about his experiences. A friend of mine said, though, if you look in the abyss long enough, it waves back to you. And so if you're dealing with that sadness on a long-term basis, I think it's really important to have balance in your life, and I watch a lot of comedy to compensate. But as you said before, we can't make a difference one person at a time. You can't make a difference for those individual soldiers, nor can I for the girls in the brothels. Arn's story reflects the experiences of many, many people. Our job is to take it out and put it out there in the world. And what's amazing, I think one of the things people will share their stories is that they are living in an isolated, lonely place where they think nobody understands what they're going through. And so to have a Westerner or a journalist come and say, I care about you, tell me your story, even if it's not going to make a difference, it's not going to get them out of their circumstances, the idea that the world is watching and the world cares is a powerful thing, I think.
Sometimes this conversation for them, for these people that you mentioned, this is the only proof that they really exist. Because we as outsiders who are coming to talk to them, we are the proof for them that that not all forget about them. And the conversation with us, the story about them, for them is somehow proof that they really existed. The only sign maybe which will be left after the only mark left after their lives. So yeah, I agree with Patty completely that, well, this is the only solution. We are not going there because of our own curiosity, and we are not gossiping. This is what the journalist's job is all about. I do not call it a mission, it's a profession, but the profession is to give the information to the other people, what is going on in different places. I always compare Afghanistan from the 90s and Afghanistan today. In Afghanistan from the 90s, from 90s, when it was country completely forgotten, all outsiders, although it was a civil war going on in this country, all outsiders were welcomed, because for them, the journalists, very few of them who were coming to Afghanistan in the 90s, they were the living proof that the world did not forget about Afghanistan at all. Today is a completely different situation, but it's also the proof for what Patty said, that for them it is also important to talk.
But this reminds me of a scene in the movie The Flute Player, Arn, where you go to visit, where you go back to Cambodia and you visit another man who had a similar experience as a child with the Khmer Rouge, and you have a very heartfelt conversation with him, and you say afterwards in the movie that you felt it was so important for him to know that there was someone else who understood what he had gone through, that there was someone else, even just one person in the world.
Yeah, it hits me a lot, but I don't think I don't know. I mean, I've been out 2 different countries. He's still there in his own life in Cambodia, in a small village. You know, I'm not sure whether he understands or not. I went to see him. It's for both of us, for me and for him. But I hope he will take it. I hope, but I'm not sure whether I will see him again in my life. But you know, a young boy also went through a lot of trouble. But I think for trust, you say that the word trust is really important. I mean, I don't know whether I told you this, that John Bird, who's a friend of mine, who like my brothers, or I know him many years, and trust is really important because I think there are writers, there are newspaper who went to the camp and interviewed and then quiet. After that, they never returned, and there's nothing, you know. Yeah, for me, trust very important for me, and I've been introduced to few other writers in the past. I never thought of the book, but my friend John Bird really said, Arn, I think it's about time now. You have done so much in your life. For the world and so I don't know what I told you. I was introduced to few writers, but it didn't work out. You're not the first one I was introduced, but first I had some question about her, about, you know, this girl with white hair who looks sophisticated and want to know about my story in Cambodia. I don't know. I don't think she can take it, just a story. But, you know, we trust each other right away after a coffee. I always use my, what they call it, my heart, you know, because I don't know much in my head. But I felt my heart, you know. So after the little conversation, it seemed like go very easily and into it. And I never expect after that she would call me one day and say, Arn, I'm coming to Cambodia. And I said, you know, to myself, I think she cares enough just to listen to me in America about my story, you know. And she said, okay, come. I called her in Phnom Penh, in the capital. She said, Arn, take me to the border. I said, you know, I've never been back there where I was. And she said, no, Arn, take me. If there is a former Khmer Rouge who probably knows about you, I want to meet him. This lady is brave. So from New York City, I don't think she cares enough. Just a nice lady that couldn't hurt a fly, you know. And she want to meet former Khmer Rouge. We managed to do it. We went to the car, and the car we have also landmines and all this stuff. That's what I mean. Trust is probably even more than the word. She showed up all the time, and she said she doesn't have to say she cares about my story. Her action is.
Thank you. I'd like to open the conversation up to the audience. Is this microphone working? Thank you, Stacy. If not, you'll just have to speak loudly.
It's on. Can we hear? Is that better? Yeah.
Yes, yes, okay. So do you want to pass it around or have people come up to the microphone? Yeah, yeah, we can pass it around.
I have a question about the people, the grown-ups, I think mainly men, but not exclusively, who persuade themselves or think themselves into a state which allows them to exploit and abuse children. And I wondered if journalists or other people who encounter such people in such circumstances pose questions to these adults. What is the process that allows you to take a child or children and to put them in harm's way, to obliterate their childhoods? Has this ever been investigated, questioned? Because I know there's a lot of attention given to the children themselves and perhaps their families. But what happens to these adults who persuade themselves that this is something that they can do with their own power in their own lives?
Well, Joseph Kony has been indicted, hasn't he, I believe, by the court in The Hague?
Yeah. He's not caught, but he was indicted.
No, but he was indicted. He has not been caught. Yeah.
There is another one. One was sentenced, Lubanga from Congo. And many warlords, unfortunately only in Africa, were captured and punished for this crime. During the, maybe not many, but there are some at least, and this is the example for the others. I mean, I talked with the warlords in Africa who had child soldiers in their armies. When I asked them about the children, usually I got the answer that the children were coming by their own, voluntarily. And it's I think that majority of the children was, at least in Congo and definitely in Western Africa, they were joining the guerrillas' army by their own will. They were not kidnapped. Sometimes it was the only sense for them, the only way to survive or to have a sense. I mean, it was a choice, simple choice, to be a victim and to wait for execution, or not to be oppressor, but to do something with your life. Very often, I observe such a situation. The other warlords, they were refusing to recognize that they have children among their own, their guerrillas. But, well, it was also, always it was a strange conversation with such a person, but it's not to us to judge with whom we have to talk or not. My job as a journalist is to talk with, I mean, mostly or everyone. And the job is for the international justice. I think what you ask, what can be done to protect better the children's rights, for me it's only one solution, because this is connected with the human rights violation. If you have a war situation, all rights are violated, and you cannot demand from the people who are participating in the war that they will respect the children's right. Why? Why not women's right or men's right, human rights? All rights are violated. But there should be, I mean, the violation of children's right should be treated as a crime against the humanity. and everyone, not to kill children, but even to have a children in the guerrilla army should be treated as a crime. So if someone would know that even if he's fighting for a noble cause, but he's taking children to his army, he will be punished. So I think this is the only solution, because the children, they are very cheap soldiers. It is very easy to transform them. They are very loyal. They are very obedient. It's very good to have such a soldiers in the warlords' armies. And it's hardly possible to persuade these warlords not to do this because this is a bad thing.
My only experience was, well, actually we had two experiences. One was when I was in Nepal. I snuck into a prison and interviewed a man who had sold his niece. And I expected somebody who would look like an ogre. He looked like a perfectly normal man. And I said, "Why did you sell your niece?" And he said, "Well, because I wanted a motorcycle." And it was like, I had this commodity and I wanted this commodity, so I swapped them. And the guards all laughed. Everybody thought that was really funny. It comes down to cultural attitudes and enforcement of the law. If that law isn't going to be enforced, they're going to be able to get away with it. What's happening in Nepal, though, is now there is a women's movement that's challenging those attitudes. But when we went up to Pailin, when we went up to the Khmer Rouge territory, one of the people we were interviewing was someone who was a warden of Arn's, who did some terrible things and also was kind and took good care of you at different points. But to set up the tone of the interview, I asked the translator to say, "I'm a guest in your home. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to ask you about anything bad you may have done." And I might not have used the best language by saying anything bad you might have done, but he said back through the translator, "Well, I didn't do anything bad." So, and these are people who live in a kind of a closed society, all former Khmer Rouge, so they all reinforce this idea that it was in service of a noble cause, and it's just massive denial when you've done something like that.
And to get to one, I want just to say, I mean, if man and woman, older people, all of us can control greed. Greed is a big problem. Greed. I mean, American company who's like Adidas or whatever company who wants to do something in other country, like a garment factory that employed a lot of young girls in Cambodia now. They said the girl is better with for $30 a month, and instead of going to prostitutes, so we are helping them. But if they cannot demonstrate, they would shoot them. If they demonstrate, they want 50 more cents. But they brought the products coming to America. They make like 3 or 4 or 5 folds. No, so the money and the material greed is you don't have enough. That really willing to. They're not going to read her book. The people who greed for money, they're not going to read the books about, oh, please respect the children and all of that. Sometimes they're not that poor either to sell their kids, or they're not that poor but it's just greed, purely greed. You have enough. And like, I couldn't believe this in our country, America. When I came here, I learned. My father told me that too. My white American told me that there is a war in Iraq and Iran, and Americans secretly sell guns to both sides of the country in the sake of money, and the children are fighting each other. So there's something like that in Africa, where the company having this warlord to have those mines for them, slave. So greed is, I think, big, important to all of us to stop it, to say we have enough and we don't abuse anybody, Don't teach them greed when they're young. Teach them love and peace. That's simple as that.
I think we also have to remember that we focus a lot on, the terrible things Joseph Kony is doing in Uganda, or the terrible things Pol Pot did in Cambodia. And there are children whose rights are violated every day, millions of children in ghettos in the United States who are victims of gun crimes and drug dealing. And we have war going on here every day, which we're not paying enough attention to. The microphone's there. I don't think it's on.
mentioning a UN was it a document or a declaration?
Yeah, it's called the
on
UN
Rights of
Convention
Children?
on the Rights of the Child.
Okay, and what year was that, and what was the rationale for the U.S. to either abstain or no?
I believe it was passed in 1989. And we had a children's rights panel a few years back at Penn with a representative from the UN who was talking about this. And the rationale for the United States not signing it is that we claim that our Constitution already protects our citizens, and also that we don't want to hand over our rights to enforce our laws to any international body. We want to be in charge of what goes on here, which is a claim we make for many things at the UN, that we're not going to put international law above American law, that American law has to come first. So those are the things that I was told. Yes?
Yeah, no, the reason the United States is not signing to this day, although it signed some related documents, is the age of recruitment for the army, for service in the American army. The rest
Because
of the world wants 18, and
right.
America wants 17.
Yes,
that is strictly the reason. Everything else is.
The Convention on the Rights of the Child defines a child as someone up to the age of 18. And I don't know if you could all hear her comment, but that the U.S. Army wants to maintain the ability to recruit 17-year-olds.
Right.
That's what they say. I think there's more to it than that.
The rest is excuses. This is the reason.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to also acknowledge the fact that Poland was the country that initiated the convention. So Wojciech, I think
Yes, it was based on the work of Janusz Korczak.
And that the Polish consulate is having a whole day meeting on Janusz Korczak on this Tuesday. So those of you who really want to know the legacy, it's a great thing. You'll probably be there. I will be there for sure. But this has been my work for this. And Arn, I don't know if you remember me, but I was the president of the International Society for Traumatic Stress Studies, and we brought you to speak.
No.
Yes, and Nancy
You look
Dupa
familiar.
was and this was 89. I mean, this is interesting. It's all the same years. But having written, actually, one of my books is called Sharing the Front Line in the Back Hills, and it covers the cost incurred by, for peacekeepers, humanitarian aid workers, justice workers, and the media dealing with, in the midst of crisis and atrocities. And I would really like you to feel more proud and less guilty in the sense of, you called yourself a vulture, things like really. You bring the voices of those who are voiceless out in the open. And you pay quite a cost for it. I mean, you really have a rather risky occupation psychologically. So I would be a little more humble about, beating yourself up for using people. Very often, you are the only ones who bring their voices out. Otherwise, they're voiceless. And again, you can talk about human rights in general and women's rights, etc., but children are really the most vulnerable. And what's important about children also is they don't know that they have rights. And I think if Penn takes on, if your committee wants to take a real, mission, is how to let children know that they have rights around the world. Yeah. We have done some work about that. In Mozambique, for example, we talked about it. And we have done work about that. In Africa, for example, going around and giving children little, when the convention was signed, we made these little packets of the convention and some other things. and we travel around Africa and hand it to children. And for them, it was a wonderful gift. But they would also come home and to the school and say, no, you can't talk to me this way. I have rights. It was really a wonderful thing, which,
I wonder if anyone
Thank
has
you.
a comment to add to that, because we are
Okay.
getting close to the end of our time.
Okay.
So does anyone want to amplify or add to that, please?
Does anyone want to add to that or comment on that? We have time for some more questions? Okay.
Happens every time.
Boom. Just talk loudly. And we could repeat the question.
Hello. I want to bring up something that's very difficult. As a therapist myself who works with children in distress situations who have undergone a lot of suffering for different reasons, kids from different cultures, okay? Watching Arn's movie, you know, I can feel that. I can see watching Patty's face as things are talked about. I understand the pain that you feel when you have to listen to those things, okay? And maybe some of us have felt some of those things in our own lives. But here's something that also I find is important to remember. We're talking about different cultures. We've seen what happens when people go into Afghanistan, whether it's the English or the Americans, and we totally disregard culture. And culture is many, many things. There are many cultures in Afghanistan. It's not just one monolithic culture, right? Even in the United States, many cultures, no matter how long you've lived here. So I wonder, you know, sometimes I get nervous when I see us as Americans or Westerners. Do I feel for, you know, children in situations like that? Yes, definitely, you bet I do. But I also get concerned that here we are trying to impose what we know to be right. We know. We have no doubt. So, and as an example, you know, a girl who's undergoing genital mutilation in a country, we automatically say, oh gosh, you know, that's definitely wrong. But if you asked that girl, or you went into and anyone could write a children's book about a beautiful culture, a traditional culture in which these rituals took place, and we're not seeing our own blind spots because we think that our way is the only way. Does this make sense to anyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Debbie, you want to comment on that?
Well, I think that, you know, I think it's a question of lens shifting, and I think that we don't realize often enough that we all wear cultural lenses, and you know, for children of minority cultures, you know, you have to. I mean, I'm speaking as a writer. When I write, I see the faces of those children. Be there. I don't know. I'm not saying this very well. You know, I was thinking when I was talking that and I was thinking when you first began talking, for young people, children have a right to their own history. They have a right to their own culture. They have a right to understand it, and it's easy to trample on that in the name of standing up for them, and from a different cultural perspective, and failing to understand where they've come from and how, you know, the cultural norms of their situation affect how they look at it, and how you, if you want to help them, have to deal with it. I guess I don't know if that makes sense.
Any other comments?
I know what you're talking about only in terms of the anti-trafficking movement. In the beginning, there were a lot of well-meaning Westerners who would come in, and I think a lot of them were former law enforcement people, and some of them were faith-based groups. Very well-meaning, came riding in, rescued these girls, pulled them out of the brothels, and then warehoused them right next door or near enough by, and didn't really think about aftercare at all. And the girls just cycled back through. And it wasn't until the Westerners made partnership with the local community and had like-looking people come in to do those rescues and then talk to the girls about life afterward and not try to proselytize or impose a Western sensibility. So there's that attitude that we so often have, that we know the right way and please let us help you. You know, we have to form partnerships.
What I see in the educational system that disturbs me a lot in Native America is there's an attitude that most of our teachers, and all of our teachers in Alaska, Bush, Alaska, virtually all of them are imported. Very, very few of them come from within the culture. And their sense is, their honest belief is, they're good people, but their honest belief is that our schools are culturally neutral. You know, they don't believe that there's culture that's being taught in the school. So when you say, you know, our children have a right to have their culture honored in their schooling, they say, well, culture, you know, you teach culture at home. It's not part of the school. I mean, that's honestly the mindset, which I think needs to be addressed.
Well, I think teachers don't even realize that the choice to have desks in a row or desks in a circle or desks in a clump is a cultural choice and is imparting some meaning that's unspoken and unexplored. Someone with a question over here.
Hi, I'm a teacher, and I would like to think I have some awareness of that. I guess this is a big question. I focus more on, I guess, the rights of the child here in the US, domestically, and I see it as this sort of bigger issue of economic deserving poor, because it's inevitable to help, you're going to help parents by helping children. But in this culture, in America, it's sort of seen, you know, you pull yourself up by the bootstraps, and if you can't do that, then, you know, sort of where do kids fit into the capitalist system, and do you find it necessary to critique larger institutions like that to get to this issue of children's rights?
Comments on the capitalist system?
Yeah, I think it's essential that you critique the larger institutions that impact the children. And you know, it's interesting kind of conundrum in our country, because we're so multi-cultural, multi-ethnic. But I think for children who are the minorities in school systems, I don't think we look often enough about the systemic.
Human rights and the Convention on the Rights of the Child precisely challenges culture and cultural habits of punishment, of abuse, of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Take one, one goes after the next. Some culture believes that if you love your child, you should be enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to just bring this back to story for a moment, and I think you can correct me if you disagree, Arn. My experience in Cambodia, because 25% of the population was killed in this genocide, it's an entire country with PTSD. Virtually every parent is suffering still from the trauma of the genocide, and that affects the way they're able to raise their children. But I think what breaks through is story. It's many people in Cambodian culture are not comfortable sharing unpleasant stories, and these are clearly traumatic and unpleasant. But many kids didn't understand, had no idea what their parents had gone through. And because of the tribunals, the International Court was trying some of the leaders of the Khmer Rouge. Children had the opportunity to their parents to say, well, did you go through that? You know, tell me about your story. And our young translator, remember, knew nothing about his parents' experience, and it was coming around and traveling with us that he became curious and asked his parents about their past. And of course, theirs was a forced marriage under the Khmer Rouge. They watched several of their children die of starvation. So he, as a child, had so much more understanding about his parents simply by transmission of the story. Something as simple as, why do you make me eat so much? You know, why are you forcing me to eat all the time? From the simple to the profound. Maybe you can talk about what story does to break that cycle of trauma passed down. Or maybe you can't.
I'd comment on that. I think it's true that when there's, and it is PTSD. I mean, it is generational. Yeah, it is. And you know, we see in Native America, you know, the great epidemics. They don't talk about it. The people that were involved in it. It wasn't, that history was not, the connections were not made. So the young people are left with feelings that they don't know where to put or where they come from, and they internalize them and they make them their fault. And they don't understand that it's part of a social fabric that has historical roots to it.
Yeah, well, that's part of what's behind the whole idea of working with former child soldiers and kind of decompressing them from their experience. And you must have seen this in Uganda.
Yeah, it's the first treatment that they got is to teach them how to express themselves and to tell what they experience in the bush. And for many of them, even this treatment is enough to come back. And then they are taught how to talk about this. The biggest problem is how not to feel guilty, because they cannot be told that they didn't done anything wrong, because actually they did. So this is the role of the priests, who were trying to tell them that they committed evil things, but they are not the most responsible for them, that they were forced to do these evil things, because to tell them or to persuade them that killing people was nothing bad, nothing wrong, it could be the beginning of next troubles when they join this, well, I don't know, normal society, our society. But not everyone, they are not 100% guaranteed that this treatment could be successful. And I've been told in Uganda that there are many examples of the child soldiers who went through this treatment, were accepted back to the society, and then left the society because they themselves couldn't accept the society, and they ran away to the bush. So it's also very complicated. But yes, to express, to tell the story, it's very important. The most important, I would say.
Well, how are we doing on time? Okay, and one more question, maybe? If not, then I'd like to thank our fantastic panelists.